I never thought the sound of polite laughter could sting this much. The ballroom glittered under 1,000 crystal lights, the air thick with champagne and pride. My father's retirement gala was everything he'd dreamed, grand, prestigious, attended by the city's elite. Everyone called him a legend, a visionary, the man who built an empire. And I was his daughter, the one who didn't follow in his footsteps. I sat at the front table, wrapped in a silk navy dress that whispered with every movement, my hands clasped around a glass of untouched wine. My company had just closed its biggest deal last week, a deal my father would have been proud of if he knew. But he didn't, because I never told him. When he took the stage, applause roared. He smiled that same confident smile he'd worn my entire life, the smile of a man who believed he was untouchable. And then, as if the spotlight had whispered something cruel to him, he said it. "You know," he chuckled, "raising children is a gamble. My son turned out brilliant, a partner at the firm. My daughter." He paused, glancing at me with a smirk. "She's still figuring things out, I guess." Laughter rippled through the room like tiny knives. My stomach twisted. The silk around me suddenly felt suffocating. I smiled anyway, that careful, practiced smile of a woman who refuses to break in public. He had no idea what I'd built, no idea how high I'd climbed. But he was about to find out. I was 22 the night I told my father I wouldn't be joining his firm. He stood behind his mahogany desk, the one carved with our family crest, staring at me like I'd just confessed a crime. "You're throwing away your future, Emma," he said flatly, his voice sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Do you have any idea how many people would kill for a seat in this company?" "I don't want your company, Dad," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "I want to start something of my own, something that matters to me." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Matters to you?" He laughed, cold, humorless. "You've been watching too many inspirational videos. You'll come crawling back the moment you realize how hard the world really is." That laughter, that quiet, superior chuckle, it burned itself into my memory. I can still hear it sometimes, echoing in moments of doubt. I remember the tremor in my hands, the lump in my throat, the desperate urge to make him understand. "Why can't you believe in me, just once?" I asked. "Because you're naive," he said simply. "And you'll embarrass yourself. And me." That was the last straw. I walked out of his office, my heels clicking against the marble like punctuation marks to a chapter one was done reading. At home, I packed a suitcase with more determination than sense. My mother tried to stop me, her eyes red and worried. Before I left, she pressed a small velvet pouch into my palm. Inside was a delicate gold pendant, a tiny compass. "Follow your own north," she whispered, "even when everyone else says you're lost." I still wear that pendant every single day. That night, I moved into a rundown studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and dreams bigger than my bank account. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I'd never again let anyone, especially him, decide my worth. As I lay awake on that first night, listening to the city hum through cracked windows, I made myself a promise. One day, I'll build something he can't ignore. Something so powerful that even his pride won't be able to deny me. And when that day comes, I won't need his approval. The first year on my own was brutal. I waited tables at night and worked on my startup idea during the day, a sustainable interior design platform that matched eco-conscious suppliers with modern homeowners. I knew it sounded idealistic, even childish, but I couldn't shake the belief that it could work. Some nights, I'd fall asleep at my tiny desk, my laptop humming like a lullaby, the city lights leaking through the blinds. Rent was always late, my savings were gone, and instant noodles had become my closest friend. But there was a strange kind of freedom in that struggle, the kind that came from knowing I was finally steering my own life. My first real break came by accident. I met Linda Parker at a networking event I almost skipped because I couldn't afford the entrance fee. She was in her late 40s, sharp, confident, with the kind of presence that turned heads without trying. I still remember her red lipstick and the way she said, "You've got that spark, kid. Don't let anyone dim it." Linda became my mentor, my anchor. She taught me how to pitch investors, how to negotiate contracts, and most importantly, how to stand my ground in a room full of men who saw me as a cute idealist rather than a serious founder. I don't want to be taken seriously because I act tough, I told her once. She smiled. Then don't act tough. Be undeniable. That line became my mantra. Slowly, painfully, my idea began to take shape. My first client was a local cafe owner who wanted an eco-friendly redesign. I poured every ounce of creativity into that space. Upcycled wood tables, green wall panels, handmade fixtures. When the cafe was featured in a lifestyle magazine, my inbox exploded. It wasn't a fairy tale rise. There were lawsuits, sleepless nights, and investors who ghosted me mid-deal. But there were also wins. Real, measurable wins. Within 4 years, Verdance Interiors became one of the fastest-growing sustainable design startups on the West Coast. By the 5th, I was sitting across from venture capitalists who once dismissed me, this time with them pitching to me. I bought my first townhouse at 28. Not lavish, but mine. And through it all, I kept my success quiet. Whenever my family called, I'd downplay everything. Yeah, I'm doing okay, I'd say, sipping espresso in my downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows. I posted photos of plants, sunsets, and coffee mugs, never deals, awards, or milestones. Dad thought I was still figuring things out. That was fine with me, because deep down, I knew my silence was the most powerful thing I owned. It gave me time to build, grow, and rise away from a shadow. And when the moment finally came for him to see who I'd become, I wanted it to happen on my terms. The night of my father's retirement gala was the kind of evening that could make or break a reputation. Every important person in the city was there, CEOs, investors, old political friends. The ballroom shimmered with money and ego. A string quartet played something elegant, and the air smelled faintly of champagne and smugness. I'd been invited out of obligation, not affection. My mother had called weeks earlier, her voice soft but pleading. "Emma, it would mean a lot to him if you came," she'd said. I almost said no. But something inside me, maybe that same stubborn flame he'd mocked years ago, whispered, "Go."
So I did.
When I walked in, heads turned, not because of who I was, but because of the quiet confidence I carried now. The woman who once trembled under her father's shadow was gone. In her place stood someone who'd built her own world. Dad was surrounded by admirers, telling stories of his glory days. His laughter filled the room, the same booming sound that once silenced me. Then the speeches began. One by one, people took the stage, praising his achievements. Finally, it was his turn. He stood tall at the podium, basking in applause, eyes glittering with pride.
"Thank you," he began.
"Tonight isn't just about me. It's about the people who stood by me through every success and failure." I almost believed he meant it. But then came the twist.
He smirked.
"Even my daughter's here tonight. She's still figuring out her path, but hey, at least she showed up." The crowd chuckled. I felt that familiar sting, the one I thought I'd buried years ago. But instead of shame, this time it sparked something else. Something electric. When the host announced the next speaker, my name echoed through the speakers. "Please welcome Emma Collins, founder and CEO of Verdance Interiors." For a moment, silence. My father's expression froze. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my emerald dress, and walked to the stage. Every step felt deliberate. The sound of my heels on marble was the only thing in the room. I took the mic, smiled, and began. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Emma Collins, and it's an honor to be here celebrating my father's incredible career." The polite applause that followed was cautious, curious. "I learned a lot from my dad," I continued.
"Discipline. Drive.
The importance of building something that lasts." I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. "And perhaps most importantly, I learned what not to do, like underestimating the people who love you." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Dad shift in his chair, jaw tightening. I took a breath, then delivered the line that would rewrite our family story forever. "Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Verdance Interiors, the company I founded 6 years ago, has officially acquired Collins Design Group.
Gasps.
Audible, sharp, deliciously real. I turned toward my father, his face pale, eyes wide. Dad, I said softly into the mic, your legacy isn't ending. It's just under new management. For once in his life, he had no words. I smiled, not cruelly, but with the calm of someone who's finally free. The crowd erupted into applause. Not for him this time.
For me.
I stepped away from the mic, the spotlight trailing me as I descended the stage. Every beat of my heart whispered the same truth. I did it. Without him. Beyond him. And as I passed his table, I caught his gaze, a mix of pride, regret, and something I'd waited my entire life to see. Respect. The silence that followed the announcement stretched for what felt like an eternity. After the applause faded and the guests turned back to their champagne, my father sat motionless, staring at the empty stage as if trying to wake from a dream he hadn't chosen. Later that night, he found me outside on the balcony. The city skyline glowed behind him, the same skyline that had watched me build the empire he never thought I could. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "You bought my company." I didn't turn around. Technically, yes. Verdance now owns 51% of Collins Design Group. The rest is distributed among your senior partners. He exhaled, a sound halfway between disbelief and something heavier. Why? I looked at him then, really looked. The man who had once towered over me now seemed smaller, older. Because it was failing, I said. Your board was planning to sell it off to a conglomerate that would have gutted your life's work. I saved it. He frowned. By humiliating me? I smiled faintly. By saving you the way you taught me, through power. He fell silent. His hands, once so steady, trembled slightly on the balcony rail. You wanted to make a point. I wanted you to see me, I said simply. To see what I've built, not out of spite, but survival. He looked away, his voice rough. I suppose I deserve that. I nodded. Maybe. But this isn't about revenge, Dad. It's about setting things right. He turned back, confused. Setting things right? Yes. I straightened, my tone calm, but unshakable. If you want to keep your name on that company, you'll need to make some changes. Real ones. I listed them carefully, not as ultimatums, but as terms of transformation. First, every new project under Collins Design Group will follow sustainable standards, no more cost-cutting at the planet's expense. He blinked, but said nothing. Second, a scholarship fund in Mom's name for young architects who can't afford college. His throat moved, and I saw his eyes glisten for the briefest second. And finally, I added softly, you'll join the advisory board at Verdance, but not as my superior, as my equal. He looked stunned. You'd still want me involved? I don't want your empire, Dad, I said. I want your experience, without your arrogance. A long pause. Then, for the first time in my life, he nodded without argument. The wind caught his tie, fluttering it like a flag, surrendering in slow motion. You're stronger than I ever was, he said quietly. I just didn't know how to handle that. I know, I whispered. You taught me to fight for my worth. You just didn't expect I'd fight you to prove it. We stood there, side by side, the city shimmering below us, two stubborn souls finally finding peace, not in defeat, but in understanding. Months passed after that night, and slowly, the dust settled. The headlines had their fun. Daughter outsmarts retired CEO, family business under new leadership. But beyond the noise, something unexpected began to happen. My father changed. He started showing up to Verdance board meetings, not to command, but to listen. He'd sit quietly through presentations, occasionally asking thoughtful questions. Sometimes he even smiled when I spoke. The old arrogance was still there in flickers, but it no longer led the conversation. We began having coffee together once a week. It was awkward at first, two people learning how to talk without fighting. But somewhere between the sips and silences, honesty began to replace pride. One morning, he handed me a folder. Inside were documents, the scholarship fund paperwork I'd asked him to create in Mom's name. He'd called it the Eleanor Compass Foundation. I froze, tracing the embossed letters with my fingers. "You remembered," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "Of course. You still wear it, don't you?" My hand instinctively went to the gold pendant around my neck, the tiny compass my mother had given me the night I left home. It gleamed softly in the sunlight. "I never take it off," I said. He nodded. "She was right, you know. You followed your own north." That was the first time I saw tears in his eyes. Real, unguarded ones. Over the next few months, the company thrived under our dual leadership. Verdance expanded internationally, Colin's design transformed into a model for sustainable innovation, and together, against every odd, we turned legacy into evolution. But the real victory wasn't business. It was balance. The woman who once walked away from her father in anger now stood beside him, not seeking his approval, but sharing her peace. One evening, after another long day at work, I found myself on the same balcony from that gala night. The city glowed beneath me, the breeze cool against my skin. I touched the pendant and thought of everything, the humiliation, the pain, the journey, and the woman I'd become. Dad joined me there, silent, comfortable. For once, no words were needed. I smiled, whispering softly to myself, the perfect closing line to my story. He taught me to fight for my worth, he just never expected I'd win. And for the first time in my life, that victory didn't feel like revenge. It felt like freedom.